Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Working with Identities, where we explore the relationship between identities and our workplaces. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic about interculturality, and we're joined with Tatiana. Tatiana, I'm going to let you present yourself and share with us a little bit from your experience.
Thank you, Mahmoud. I'm Tatiana. I'm German Palestinian. Grew up half my life in the Middle East and then in Europe. So that's my kind of cultural background. A little bit of my kind of career life journey. Before I came into the space of working today as a coach in interculturality and diversity and inclusion, I actually started my journey as in the space of international development, where I worked many years in the Middle East, working on similar topics of social justice, social inclusion, representation, gender inclusion, and inclusive leadership. So from there, I actually moved into the corporate world just about 7 years ago or so, when I went back to university and I did a master's in cultural diversity management. And then as my journey took me to always different places, different cultures, I kind of more and more moved into the space of focusing on inclusivity and inclusive workspaces, and also inclusive topics of inclusive leadership and effective diverse teamwork. So that's me in a nutshell. And I'm happy to be here today and have that chat with you, Mahmoud.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for being here today. And it's very interesting as well because, like, the way this conversation rose, this of generating this episode was because Tatiana was my coach on interculturality, and she really gave me a lot of insights and a very new vision of how to view interculturality and understanding in a different way. So connected to this, maybe Tatiana, you can explain for those who don't understand or don't know the term interculturality, what exactly is that?
So, interculturality, in a nutshell, it's basically about you and the other. So, it's about identities. It's about understanding who you are within the dynamic aspects of what actually makes you who you are. So, it's not just focused or born to what we understand as a static cultural background identity based on, the country you come from or the ethnicity or the religion. It's much more dynamic in the sense that it recognizes the many identities you carry based on your values, on your experiences, the belief system you carry in you. So it's also a very personal aspect of understanding who you are when we are speaking about interculturality. And it also relates to in a sense, about understanding yourself, self-awareness, and other awareness. So being aware that there are other perspectives, other people with very different experiences, and understanding the dynamic of those coming from the different side of ideas, perspectives, and how that kind of how you connect, collaborate, navigate, and bridge.
Yeah, yeah. This is for me was it really gave me a lot of perspective when we were discussing this in our sessions. And maybe we can connect this then to our first question that we have for today, which is, can you explain how interculturality can serve as a tool to understand and respond to individual needs rather than relying on generalized approaches?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, one of my main reasons why I went actually into intercultural diversity coaching, and we're focusing more on inclusive in culture and inclusive environments, is because I kind of my biggest critique to the diversity and equity and inclusion space is that we often try to generalize so that we can excel quicker and scale basically in the work we do. However, this whole work of creating inclusive cultures, more equitable societies, basically bottom line, more social cohesion, is something that actually has to do with, it's a very personal journey. It is actually starts with each and everyone who engages or seeks to engage in these kind of processes of becoming a more diverse workplace, a more diverse community, a more equitable workplace and community, as much as you want to become an inclusive leader or an inclusive culture in a workplace. It starts at the bottom line with understanding, who are we as a society, as a community, and as a person, and what drives me, what informs me based on my values and belief system that I kind of gained throughout my first 15 years of life experience, and then gradually, as I grow up to be a full adult and engage in the workspace and in society, what informs me, and understanding that actually, in a sense, is a starting point, to understand what your needs are, where your gaps are in understanding more complex environments, and then how to engage, navigate, and connect with the super diversity around you. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like this journey of starting through understanding oneself, and then through this journey, understanding how we interact with different people, with different contexts, and through this understanding, we're able to foster a better understanding and collaboration with other members. Yeah, did I get that right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's so, yeah, it really starts with basically the work on yourself.
Mhm.
And we say always, the best leaders are the leaders who understand where they're coming from, who they are, and who they want to become and be.
hmm And you mentioned something that I remember a lot from our sessions that maybe we can explore a little bit more or explain a little bit more, which is the separation between values and belief systems. You mentioned it in passing, but I think an interesting separation that I think people might be very interested in learning a little bit more about.
Yeah. Yes. So anyone who goes through the journey with me on achieving personal excellence will, at some point, yes, navigate through understanding their value system. And so when we talk about value system and beliefs, we're talking about two separate entities that actually elements that actually integrate together and make us who we are in terms of how we show up and how we make decisions or react to situations and what decisions we make. So values is always what I say. There's nothing such as bad values. We all have values that are great, and I still have to meet that person that tells me greed is their core value. so so values is something that we grow up with. It becomes instilled in us through the families, the institutions, the communities, the social environment that we grow up in, even the education then that we pursue, even the field we go into, social science or the STEM. All this kind of builds up into a value system. How in terms of how we perceive what is right and wrong, what we think is good and bad, what we believe to be professional, what not. So values, in a sense, are a great thing to have, and I would say they're actually extremely important to have as a core compass to understand where we want to go in our life and who we want to be. Beliefs, on the other hand, is what kind of motivates these values. So basically, understanding our values, knowing that, for example, my core value is one of them is generosity. I grew up in a household where we always had our doors open, always hosted people. I was always told, this is what makes you Tatjana. This is our family, and so this is a core value. However, the way we live it, me and my brothers, for example, is very different, and that's based on our belief system that kind of started kind of being contextualized as we had our own individual experiences growing up. Now, as I mentioned previously, I grew up to travel a lot. I studied in different continents. I moved and worked in different continents. So for me, my belief system definitely is a very different one than, for example, my brother, who basically lived in Germany for most of his life after we moved there at the age of 11. And what is important is then to understand, what is it that I believe behind generosity? If my value is generosity, what is it that I believe generosity to be, to look like, to feel, right? And that comes based on experiences I made through traveling a lot and moving to different places. And so belief systems are always, the motor, if I say, for living our values. But that motor needs to be understood, because depending on my belief, I can accelerate in achieving goals that I have in mind. So if I want to become an inclusive leader, understanding how my belief system motivates me to be that better person, that, better leader who can be adaptive, who can be flexible. And at the same time, it is important to understand what are my limitations with this belief, because every belief comes with kind of accelerators, so opportunities to achieve goals and visions that you have for yourself and for your society and workspaces. But it also comes with limitations. With every belief, you will find what we call a blocker, or sometimes, if you go deeper in the psyche, we can call it fear. Fear that holds us back, fear that makes us make decisions that are maybe not contributing to us accelerating based on our core values. So that's basically beliefs. Beliefs are the motor that kind of, drive us. And action, in a sense, really is the very personal I, the motivators for who I am, or of how I show up. And that is key to understand, to having to understand it in order to really become more self-aware.
It like just listening to you, it already like explains a lot of the conflicts or misunderstandings that can happen in different contexts, and specifically as well like in the workplace. Like it really gives a framework to have a deeper understanding of why we do things, why we perceive things a certain way. And I think it also connects a lot with what we talked about earlier, through this understanding of self, to understand how to interact with another and to understand another person. And through this dissecting of why do I do things the way I do things, or why do I perceive things the way I perceive things. So I think like this connects very nicely with the following question I have for you, which is, how can leaders and organizations use interculturality to connect with people on a deeper level without reinforcing stereotypes?
Mm. That was a good question, and I think, what is key here is to understand what happens when you go into this journey of intercultural competency development. You start actually unlearning all the stereotypes, or kind of ideas you have about certain groups, and you start understanding the complexity of your own identities and that of others. And so you start retreating. Often what I observe with my clients is that they start retreating from assumptions, from making always assumptions, and based on assumptions operating on, engaging with others. So that is the power of what, the power of what intercultural competency development offers you. When you start unpacking your value system, and when you start understanding your motor, your engine that is driving you, and when you are willing to lean in and understand, what makes you act the way you do, or make decisions the way you do, or speak the way you do, act the way you do. When you are much more aware what's motivating those actions, those behaviors, you somehow find this empowerment to kind of step over and look at people first as people, as the person, not, oh, this one from the LGBTQ ERG group, or, oh, this one with the hijab. You start seeing the person, and that becomes critical in any setting. If you are dealing with a very diverse team and you want to be effective and striving, and even as a company, that if you want to experience growth, you will have to actually go down to understanding the people individually, not just as a social group, but really see what motivates people as a leader, and kind of work on that in terms of adapting and leading with adaptation. But in order
That's
to do that, you need that self-awareness. So there's no way I'm going to understand you, Mahmoud, as the person, and why you did what you did or behaved the way you do in my team meeting, if I'm not fully aware how I'm coming across to you, or if I'm not fully aware of why I'm reacting to you in the way I am.
definitely.
And just
But
something
also
maybe
this,
to connect, sorry, Mahmoud, but that was something that I was actually thinking about. That is a very good example that happens to me a lot when I was working with companies. Um, And when when you start setting your values, oftentimes companies are very proud of their values, their company values that they um, pursue. And then and then you see, they get like these aha moments where, like, why? Well, we have these amazing values of respect, openness, uh, inclusion, but why is it just not, when we look at then, go down and look at team issues, and you see all these conflicts um, in relationships, which is impacting the performance. You start asking about why. We all share the same company values, and everyone will assign and say, yes, we have great values, we all, nobody will disagree with these great values. But then when you go down further and you start asking, well, what does this value mean to you? you know you will start seeing how belief systems are playing out in everyone very differently. So until you crack that and understand, what are the belief systems around those values that everyone holds based on their life experiences, you will never see this cohesion evolve. So if you want to achieve kind of this cohesion, um, where people can really focus on productivity and effectiveness, and achieve kind of growth, you really do want to start looking at your intercultural competency as a leader, as a company, as a whole company. Where do you stand on this? And then take these steps towards engaging in a more understanding of belief systems around those values, and creating a common kind of vision of how do you want to interpret these values as an organization, as a team.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing that comes to mind as well here is that the fact that all of this requires deep conversations, requires creating this safe space, right? So do you, like, what are some key strategies for leaders to create environments where people feel safe to learn, progress, and express themselves? Because again, like, going into such deep levels really requires the capacity to create the spaces for them, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always say your goal is not, you can't create safe spaces. Safe spaces come to be because of your um, engagement style, your leadership style. So, in general, I can say that we know, it's not rocket science. We see this even in small family units. When do kids feel safe, or your teenagers feel safe to speak up and share, their issues, their troubles? It's when they feel listened to, when they feel heard, when they feel seen, right? When I'm not coming in as this, I'm the leader here, I'm the authority, this is what's going to be done. But rather, when you're humble and you know that you don't know everything, and because I'm an adult, I'm not seeing the world the way my son or my daughter would be seeing it. Because I'm not you, I'm experiencing the space that we are sharing right now differently because of my personal identities and experiences, right? So understanding that we can't know everything at all times, being humble about not knowing, and being okay with not having to be the authority, I think that is actually generally today this the where I experience and see safe spaces being created. Because again, um, the world is changing, and power dynamics is not anymore like a straight line from up down. Authority doesn't work anymore this way with the and we have a lot of young people going into the workforce. So there is this also question where, as a leader, I say, we need to, or as a person with authority, ask ourselves, well, what makes me in this time, in this space, a good leader that can support my team, support my organization, achieve inclusivity, achieve diversity, whatever your D&I goals are, or even your business goals. But asking yourself, what is it? Lean in, be curious, inquire. That's how you start creating spaces where people feel safe and empowered to share what they think, what they feel. Um, and that's, I think, it goes down to, it's a very simple ingredients to a personality: being self-aware and humble about our limitations of knowing.
I love like like this framing of leadership as well as like this role of support, this role of being people oriented, being curious about the people that surround you and wanting to really for them to thrive, in that sense. And as opposed to a more authoritarian figure, like somebody who comes on top, but like to see like this shift, as you mentioned, like this shift in power in that sense, and viewing leadership from another perspective, specifically with, as you mentioned, like new generations that have different ways of seeing leadership as stepping into the workplace, and the importance of doing this shift. But I also like I can imagine like some leaders might face some challenges when trying to implement this intercultural approach, specifically if they're coming from a different approach that they have been implemented, right? So have you faced like with leaders that you worked with maybe specific challenges that you can share with us? What kind of challenges could they expect while doing the shift? Because I can imagine for some the shift might be bigger than to others.
Hmm. Yes, of course. And one thing is, when working with the intercultural competency tool that I kind of apply in coaching, and one thing is, it's a kind of what we always kind of stress. It's a developmental process. It's a journey, right? It's a journey towards achieving personal excellence. Um, and in that journey, it's not about kind of assessing where you're at and then kind of going to the next goal. But it's actually more evolutionary, kind of accept the hardest thing is for many leaders, and is to kind of understand, that there is no end to self-development, to growth. There is no end to it. I mean, the goal is actually, to continuously learn to adapt and to be able to collaborate and bridge and navigate differences, right? We're constantly in change mode. We're constantly in volatile, operating in volatile situations, environments, right? We have a super diverse workforce and society. So what is the challenge for me oftentimes is when I work with leaders who actually do assess on a high level of adaptation, but then to help those leaders kind of turn to become humble, so to understand that yes, you are very, very good at identifying differences. You're very good at getting everyone on the same page and getting things through. You know, however, oftentimes these leaders struggle with maintaining their authenticity and saying, well, actually, I'm more of this type, and I don't, and I don't like doing this, but because this is what this generation. Let's say if you have a young team, you have to kind of work with a very young team, and you're adapting to their kind of ways of doing things. And even if you're successful, it drains you because it's not your natural habitat. It's not what you generally. It's not your default way of operating, right? And then what becomes important is to be able to kind of maintain authenticity, be true to yourself, and then just kind of learning to be kind to yourself in a way, to say, this is hard on me, but I will lean in because it's working. You're getting the results. But at the same time, really to acknowledge and kind of be your authentic selves. A lot of times, and I bring this always to the family unit. I always say, I don't need to be loved as the leader in the house, but I need to be respected. And so for me, also to earn that respect, that I'm always trying my best to adapt to the changing and environment and modes of my, especially my teenage child, requires a lot of effort for me, and it is mentally draining, physically draining, and yet, I earn that respect by kind of always saying, look, this is me. I'm very aware of my limitations, and I speak them, I formulate them, and I only require to also be respected in that. So, and that's exactly that point is where generally you will see in teams, whether you're talking about the home or the workspace, it's in this frictional space is where you can overcome those challenges of consistently having to adapt and kind of navigate differences, is by acknowledging and being humble about, the difficulties it brings to you as a person, because default you are different, wired, because of your own experiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, just like for us, like to also like to connect everything and also see how these conversations keep evolving. Maybe I would love to ask you as well, like, how do you see interculturality evolving in the context of specifically like DI work, especially in leadership and organizational culture?
Yeah. So, one thing in the European context, I can say very much, my experience is, there's very little space or acknowledgement around, actually, the impact intercultural competency, development can have. Even within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, right? Even so, if you have a company and they have that department, even in these departments, oftentimes I find we fall short in recognizing actually the hard skill behind, actually investing in developing people's intercultural competency. And I call it a hard skill because there's nothing soft about actually learning how to be a better intercultural communicator, conflict resolution. These are hard skills, knowing how to navigate and resolve problems in a way that is, supporting the organization and the team, everyone healthy, move forward. These are hard skills. And so for me, oftentimes I'm a bit baffled and I see the challenge in, kind of moving more into this kind of learning journey as a requirement or as part of your DNI programs, integrated in HR, learning and development. There's still a lot of space and room to explore and engage and invest in this kind of hard skills. For me, these are more essential hard skills for success, whether you have a DNI department or do any DNI work or not. So, in the US, there's a backlash right now happening around the DNI space. But, whether that or not, the reality is that we work with many different personalities, with very many different identities from many different cultural experiences, be it based on the values they have, the beliefs they have, the identities, the personal identities they hold true to themselves. I mean, we're just such a super diverse global community, and we are very mobile. So we're moving a lot around and reinventing ourselves here and there. So then it becomes super crucial for any organization, even whether you work global or local, is to actually have these hard skills to be able to really engage in intercultural competency, to be able to bridge and navigate and actually build cohesion around, the very many differences we bring to the table.
Super, super interesting, Tatiana. Thank you very much for this. I don't have any more questions for us today, but I want to leave a minute in case you have any final thoughts you want to share with our audience.
Well, yeah, maybe the only thought I will just say is, it's a journey. Becoming an inclusive team or an inclusive organization is a journey that definitely has structural components to it that need to be pursued in terms of policies, but the bottom line, from my experience now, having lived and worked in so many different places around the world, it all starts with what we believe we can do with our beliefs. And it's just the motor to everything. Whether we achieve what we want to achieve or not, as a person, as a company, as a family, really goes down to understanding our belief system and how that drives us. So yeah, I think that's with what I'll end it with. A thought for everyone to take on and to think about it. And to
Yeah.
seek intercultural competency not as some woolly soft skill that you kind of get to learn or you expire. No, it's absolutely, there are a lot of ways where you can actually start developing these skills, which are absolutely necessary. They are hard skills, and there are tools out there. There's a lot of things you can do to excel in becoming this inclusive leader, this inclusive person, this person who contributes to cohesion for everyone.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you very, very much, Tatiana, for being here today and sharing such amazing knowledge and insights with everyone listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Working with Identities, where we have explored interculturality and how to implement it in our workspaces. So, yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahmoud. Bye bye.